Hi, this is Craig Simon with the Malden Church of Christ. This week's sermon recap coming from Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 19. I'm here flying solo today. Dad is not with me. He's on vacation. So you got just me. Genesis 1 through 19 from Genesis chapter 1 in the AM hour. In the PM hour, we talked about the value of the day, of one day. So let's get into it. This week's sermon recap. We started with what it means to deny a literal 24-hour day in Genesis chapter 1. Well, plainly stated, that disregards Scripture. It seeks to harmonize secularism and Scripture by adopting unbiblical theories like the day-age theory or the gap theory or theistic evolution, where God began the act of creation and just basically got the ball rolling downhill, and then the process of evolution continued that on. And we see that's not the case in Genesis chapter 1. But it also questions God's power and His ability. You know, God could have chosen any way to create all things, but He chose a 24-hour day that you read about. The evening and the morning were the first and the second and third and so on and so forth. But it also asserts that delicate ecosystems could have survived without one another. And I gave one example Sunday morning. There are thousands upon thousands that we could use, but consider this one example. When you look at the squash plant, it puts forth a female flower, and then it also puts forth a male flower. And so it does this over the course of a few days. And one morning, for only a few hours, in the morning, the male flower opens and the female flower opens. And pollinators, primarily squash bees, but also honeybees or wasps or certain types of beetles or moths or butterflies, they might go into the flower seeking for nectar. And as they go into the male flower, they're going to get pollen on their legs or on their wings on their body. And then as they go into the female flower, that pollen is going to drop into the female flower, which in turn is going to produce the fruit at the base of the plant. And we understand with naturalistic evolution, that's not possible. With a day-age theory, that's not possible. Because God created plants on day three. Day three, God made flowers and grass and trees. And He didn't produce the creatures that can pollinate the plant until day 6. Consequently, if there were thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years in between the production of the plant and the production of the pollinator, it would never be pollinated. I want you to notice in Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 19, that you have 4 days of creation. Day 1, God creates the earth. He creates the sea. He creates basically a voidless earth that's covered in water. One of the ways that we know that Genesis chapter 1 is 24-hour days, because the text says the evening and the morning is the first day and the second day and the third day, so on and so forth. But we also know, based upon the 10 commandments that we read about in Exodus chapter 20, I want you to notice these verses when God is talking about the importance of keeping the Sabbath day holy. That was given to the children of Israel. He brings their mind back to creation. In Exodus chapter 20, beginning in verse 9, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. Why? Look at verse 11. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested or ceased to work on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Now we wouldn't assert that each day that we work is a 1,000-year period. Neither was it in Genesis chapter 1. It was a literal 24-hour day. And so on day 1, God created the heavens, space, and the earth. It was formless. It was covered in water. He created light by saying, let there be light. And darkness, of course, exists as the absence of light. We read about the spiritual connotation of that in John chapter 3, verses 19 through 21. Well, on day 2, when we consider day 2, God created the clouds and the sky, or the firmament, or we would probably use the word atmosphere. There was a separation between the waters that were above in the atmosphere and the waters that were below the atmosphere, such as seas or rivers or streams or lakes. On day three, God created the plants, all sort of variety of plants, the grass that dwells out in the field and produces after its own kind, the herb and the tree that produces after its own kind. But we also see an interesting fact that God does not necessarily create land. The scripture says that the land appears. There was probably one continent. All of the seas were gathered to themselves. All the land was gathered together with itself. But notice the importance that He created these things. He created each one of these plant lives according to their own kind. We understand that when we plant an apple seed, it's going to create an apple tree. We understand in the same way when we plant a squash or a zucchini or a tomato seed or a pepper seed, it's going to create after its own kind. But then also on day 4, God created the sun and the moon and the stars. We read about in Genesis chapter 1, verses 15 through 19. So that was our AM hour. He created the sun to rule the day, the moon to rule the night. Why? For signs, for seasons, for days, for years, for light, and by implication for heat, because we understand that the sun heats the earth as well. So as we closed out our Sunday AM, we considered God's power, and we went back to the first lesson and talked about His plot, or the narrative of creation, His power and His presence. We talked a little bit about the interdependency of the ecosystems and the species that demands that creation took place within 6 literal 24-hour days. We talked about how light and darkness were used in the book of Genesis and throughout all of Scripture, basically to personify good and evil. And then we talked about this very important point that each kind will produce after its own kind. But then secondly, in the PM worship hour, we talked about the value of one day. When you look at the last few verses of James chapter 4, we understand that each day is busy. We understand that each day is important, that maybe I have to work today or maybe I have to work tomorrow. But we live based on the calendar, based on the week, based on the clock, based on the hourglass, so to speak. Each day is important. We may plan events like the person in James chapter 1. We may plan to do this or that. We may work for a living and we plan to make such and such amount of money on this particular day of work. We may plan the events for the next day or plan our vacation for the next day or the next week or the next month. But we understand that each day is certainly important. Each day is indeed a gift from God. God expects us to work. We read in Ecclesiastes chapter 5 and verse 18 that this is part of our labor under the sun, to work and to make money and to support ourselves and to support our families. So number one, each day is important. And then number two, each day brings new opportunities. Each day we have a new opportunity to serve someone. We have a new opportunity to evangelize in some way. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 10 and verse 42 that even if you give one of these little ones a cup of cold water in my name, you've done something great. You've done something important. You have met a need. You have served in an avenue where there needs to be service. And we're also told to encourage one another while it is called today, to exhort one another while it is called today. Don't put those spiritual things off. Things that need to be done or avenues wherein we can serve one another. Let's do those things to today and make a difference in someone's life today. And then thirdly, we talked about that each day provides spiritual renewal. Lamentations chapter 3 verses 22 through 23 tells us that God's mercies are new every morning. How great it is that God provides a blessing every day that we live. We read in Psalm chapter 84 and verse number 10 that each day is valuable. Each day should be lived unto God's glory. We consider that one day in His presence, one day in His courts is better than 1,000 years elsewhere. And then finally, as we closed our lesson Sunday afternoon, we mentioned this idea that each day should be lived unto God's glory. Today is the day of salvation. Tomorrow may be too late. We read in 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and in verse 2 that we need to do those things while it's called today. Not wait until tomorrow, not procrastinate, not put off a relationship with God, but that we need to make that decision today. Each day is important. Each day brings new opportunities. Each day provides renewal. Each day should be lived unto God's glory. We hope you enjoyed the sermon recap from this week, from the AM hour and from the PM hour. Come and join us this next Sunday as we study God's creation, how on the fifth day God created birds and fish, and what all of that entailed. And we're going to draw some valuable lessons as we look throughout Scripture, what the Bible has to say. You know, there are some interesting lessons that the Bible teaches when we consider birds, when we consider fish, when we consider the beautiful things that God has created for His glory and for our benefit. We would encourage you to come join us at the Malden Church of Christ, be a part of what we're doing here. Again, if you would like a Bible, we mentioned this last week, but we do have Bibles available. If you would like a Bible, reach out to us at maldenchristians@gmail.com or a correspondence course at maldenchristians.com. We would be happy to get that for you. God bless. Until we meet again, this has been Sermon Recap at the Malden Church of Christ.